Something I forgot to mention in the last video is that Danny is the one who almost hit Amy, yet Danny escalated the situation at the end of the last episode. It's the epitome of blaming the victim, which the left claims they don't like doing. If you are in a parking space and someone is driving by behind you, they have the right of way. If you're in a parking space, you have to wait for people to pass behind you before you back out. Danny getting upset at Amy because she got mad that he almost hit her is him blaming his bad driving on her. Amy laying on her horn and flipping Danny off was her response to him almost backing into her, and nothing else would have happened if Amy had just driven home in peace, but Danny had to go and chase her through town like a lunatic. Danny was the one initially in the wrong. Amy defended herself, and now he's mad because she defended herself. Then he escalates the situation even more by finding her address and vandalizing her bathroom instead of just moving on with his life. Morality is not the writer's strong suit. The episode starts off with the camera staring at a door for what seems like an eternity. I am 22 seconds into the episode and the show has already managed to bore me. That's a new record. 900 years later, the door opens. Amy storms in, screaming, swearing, and waving her gun around. She grabs a towel and goes into the bathroom to clean up the mess left by Danny, Dr. Urinator. Sounds like a supervillain name, but not one that's intimidating. What do you do to terrorize the heroes of our universe, Dr. Urinator?
Well, I pretend I'm a contractor, then once I'm in their house, I pee all over their bathroom, and then I run away
like a little bitch. At the end of episode 1, Amy had committed Danny's license plate number to memory, so she reverse searches for his name. She knows he's a handyman, so she Googles his name plus handyman services to find out his phone number. Amy calls Danny, he answers, and she tries to threaten him. Danny calls her a bitch and hangs up on her. Amy calls again, Danny sends her to voicemail, Amy screams and waves her gun at her phone. At that moment, George walks in. I'm unsure if it would have been worse for George to walk in on Amy fucking the gun or just waving her gun at her phone. I suppose it doesn't matter because both instances are accurate portrayals of the lunatic she is. The title card assaults my eyes with a hideous drawing of an ass. I'm not kidding, it's a giant ass. At first I wasn't sure if it was supposed to be a person, but then I caught an eyeball up at the top, like the person is looking over their shoulder while shoving their ass into the camera. We're living in Idiocracy, everybody, where the entertainment is just a butt on a screen. Then the pretentious title, The Rapture of Being Alive, flashes on the screen, and I have no idea what it means. I suppose the writers think they're being clever, but a universal truth is that the more you force yourself to sound clever, the further into stupidity you sink. Next, we have Paul and Danny at a pool. Danny is grilling some steak and Paul is swimming. Danny tells Paul that the person he had the road rage incident with turned out to be a woman. Danny gets a notification on his phone that someone has left him a 1-star review of his handyman business. The review calls him incompetent. Based. The review also adds that he peed all over her bathroom. I wouldn't hire a contractor who wasn't potty trained either. 20 minutes and 25 seconds into the show, we get our first instance of social engineering. Boo! A white woman is coming down the stairs dressed in a swimsuit and holding a towel. She sees Danny, stops, actively throws her head back in frustration, then turns around and goes back upstairs. Her mood is exactly how I feel about this show. This is the same kind of social engineering we had in the first episode with Danny at the store, where minorities think all white people are annoyed by non-white people. They're really trying to cram this down our throats. They're really trying to bring racism back to society. Assholes. To make this a normal scene, all they would have had to do was make the pool look busy. The actual reason the woman was annoyed is because she was probably just hoping the pool was unoccupied. This is a motel, so I assume she was on vacation. I've gone to hotels before and opted out of using the pool if it's too crowded and I don't want to be around anybody at the moment. Once again, an innocuous incident has been turned into a racist one. Danny tells Paul he has to take control of his life, presumably because Danny thinks Paul isn't doing anything with his life. I'm not really sure what Paul does for a living, other than trade cryptocurrency. Well, at least before his thief of a brother changed all his passwords out of jealousy. Paul tells Danny to change his passwords back, then says he will become rich trading crypto, travel with his friends, and play basketball. Danny doesn't like that answer, so he keeps interrogating Paul. Paul responds sarcastically, probably because he's sick of his unsuccessful brother pretending like he knows what a person should do with their life, which Danny doesn't like, so he just insults Paul and tells him, "You're just saying higher numbers." Paul insults Danny's lack of cooking skills, based, and then leaves. Danny gets a second phone notification from someone named June, which is really just Amy leaving a review under a different name that says bad plumbing, bad breath. Also true, because Danny has shown he is unable to control his own plumbing. Interestingly, the only good piece of writing in this show comes from Amy being a keyboard warrior. I guess we know now where the writers get their inspiration. George has decided to clean the bathroom floor, and we get our second instance of social engineering. Boo! Social engineering against men, again, emasculating the man by making him not only clean the floor, but making him clean up the floor that another man has peed on. Amy even says, "Honey, you shouldn't be cleaning up another man's piss." Even Amy knows this is effeminate behavior, but the writers still put it in the show to embarrass George. Even though Amy knows it, she still never makes any attempt to help him clean. Who did she think was going to clean it if she wasn't, and then if he wasn't, because she told him he didn't have to? Did she think the piss was just going to magically disappear on its own? To turn this into a normal scene, all they would have had to do was have both Amy and George cleaning the floor together, because cleaning is a life skill, and it would have shown that George is a good man who is willing to help his wife clean their house, despite it being another man's pee. By having George clean all alone, they're showing that George's balls have a permanent home in Amy's purse. George is such a hippie. He's portrayed as nice because George defends Danny's ridiculous behavior when he says, "You never know what someone's going through. Maybe he just has bladder issues." Common sense is not George's strong suit, I can tell you that much. Then he says more hippie bullshit. Well, anger's just a transitory state of consciousness, which causes me to dislike him even more. You moron, anger is an emotion, a human emotion. Although I'm not surprised you don't get that, because I'm starting to wonder if you're even human. Amy is wishing George would grow a pair as she asks him whether he wants to go to Danny's address and say something. She's practically begging for him to find his testosterone again. I don't feel sorry for her though, because these are the consequences of feminist propaganda. Feminists have been telling women for years that they don't need a man to stand up for them. But the thing is, it feels really good when a man stands up for a woman. When a man defends a woman's honor, it shows that the man gives a crap about the woman, which is what Amy wants. She wants to feel like George gives a crap about her, but she fails to see that her own ideology is precisely the reason why she's married to a neutered puppy. Feminists have been telling women for years that men shouldn't stand up for them because they can do it themselves. But you never realize what you've got till it's gone. It turns out, feminists got rid of one of the things they actually wanted in life. But no one ever said feminists were smart. Amy begs George to be assertive, and he still doesn't. He just glares at her and continues identifying as an effeminate male Cinderella. Amy then taunts George with the one thing she knows he will be pissed off about, which is that Danny doesn't like that George is Japanese. Imagine loving racism so much that you are even racist against your own self. I have a newsflash for all of you. You're all Americans. Amy's taunts about George's ethnicity works, and she and George show up at Danny's address. 3 kids are sitting by a wall, and they all look at George and Amy, but don't say anything. Amy finds a random window, looks inside, sees the back of a man's head, and says this stupid line, "Now that is the back of an Asian head if I've ever seen one." How do you know what someone's face looks like from the back of their head? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. This shows how much stock the writers put into judging someone solely on their appearance. Wow. Do you have the Faceback app from the other guys?
Alan and his apps. He loves them. You know, he's designed 3 of his own. One of them, can I tell him? Mm-hmm. One of them, you can take a picture of anybody's face, and I'll tell you what the back of his head looks like.
Face back.
Face back.
Got some horrible reviews coming out of the gate. It's gonna hit.
It's gonna catch.
An old man in a wheelchair comes by and asks Amy and George if they need a room. It turns out that this man is the owner of the motel. I felt like having him be in a wheelchair was only there to fill a diversity quota checkbox. There's no reason why this character would have to be in a wheelchair other than virtue signaling to the disabled community, as the left likes to say. Also, what purpose would it serve when you're casting someone to put them in a wheelchair when their job is to manage a motel? If a tenant has a problem upstairs, how is he going to get up there to solve the problem? There are no ramps up to any of the other floors, and the motel doesn't look fancy enough to have elevators. There's nothing wrong with people in wheelchairs, but this casting choice for this character makes zero sense. Amy responds saying she is looking for Danny Cho, and the man who Amy and George saw through the window leaves his room, walking past the camera in the background, obviously not an Asian guy. I told you, you can't judge someone's race from the back of their head. The only thing that this shot proves is that the writers and Amy are racist, which I can imagine wasn't the funny moment they were looking for. The motel owner says that he took over the ownership of the motel after Danny's family gave it up because the police raided it for illegal goods that were being run through the motel. We see how good of a cousin Isaac was. He single-handedly ruined Danny's parents' business. Such great characters we have here, just stellar role models, the epitome of morality. Danny is in a loading dock with Isaac, unloading some boxes that he is going to store at Danny's place. Clearly Danny hasn't learned from the past, and here we are paving the way for history to repeat itself. Danny lives at the motel. So, if Isaac once again runs illegal goods through the motel, Danny will be held accountable because the goods were at his place. But no one said he was smart. Danny says Isaac is going to have to wait longer to get paid back and tells him about Amy leaving bad reviews for his business. Isaac says it's fine, they're family, but that he'll take the title to Danny's truck in the meantime. These are the main characters. We're supposed to like them, but they're horrible. I'm supposed to believe that Isaac is a nice guy because he told Danny not to worry about paying him back, while he takes the title to Danny's truck hostage and stores boxes with mysterious contents in them at Danny's place, while having a past of running illegal goods through a motel, which he got caught and went to prison for. It's the epitome of morality. This is why I think the writers are trying to make me think crime is a positive thing. Unfortunately for them, I just think Isaac is a douche canoe and Danny is incredibly stupid. I don't give any fucks if you're family. If you're a criminal, you can piss off. I have an uncle who asked me to photocopy an entire textbook for him when I was a teenager, and he said he'd pay me back. I was a stupid teenager at the time, and so I agreed. After I gave him his stupid photocopies, he never paid me back, and I was out $20. After I asked him multiple times to pay me back and he didn't, I realized he had lied to me, so I told him to piss off. Being family doesn't give you an excuse to treat me like shit. You're just a horrible person if you think that. Isaac tells Danny to start a new business under someone else's name and says that Danny can use his name. Danny finds out the boxes contain laptop batteries. Isaac says someone sells them to him wholesale. All kinds of red flags go off in my head that had already gone off the instant I saw boxes and Isaac in the same place. What does Danny do though? Danny says, okay. Then Isaac qualifies. It's nothing like the motel, dude. Completely legit. I'm paying tariffs, all that shit. Danny says, yeah, of course, yeah. Dude, Isaac just lied to you, you dumb shit. If he wasn't, what the hell reason would he have to store these particular boxes at your place? So he can deny all association with them and say they're not his because they're not on his property. If it was legit, wouldn't it be easier for him to have his own merchandise at his own place where he can have easier access to it when he makes a sale? Of course he's running this shit illegally again, you dumbass. Amy and George go out to their car and find out they have a flat tire. They look over at the 3 kids sitting by the wall, suspicious that maybe one of them did it. George opens the spare tire compartment and nervously looks at the spare tire because this is the first time he's ever seen a spare tire in his entire life. He's not supposed to know how to do masculine things like change a tire. Here, we have more social engineering. Boo! This episode is really picking on George for some reason. Social engineering once again emasculates George when Amy is surprised that George has never changed a tire before. I don't know why she's surprised. The man wore a sweater with flowers on it to a dinner party in the first episode. She should have known who she married. George gets offended, as he should, because he's being emasculated, gets defensive and says, "Have you?" I'm surprised Amy didn't just do it herself in this modern world. Can't women do anything men can do? Oh wait, maybe that's the problem. Men can't do anything, so therefore women can't either? It's also stupid that the show doesn't even have either of them bother to look up how do I change a flat tire on their phones and use it as a learning opportunity. The kids look over at Amy and George, and one of them says he'll change it for $40. Now I'm really suspicious the kids did it because maybe they were looking to make some easy money. They saw George get out of the car earlier and they were like, wow, yeah, this guy, sure, he's tall, but he's probably a pussy. Let's make some money off him. I bet he can't change a tire. George takes out his wallet, but then asks Amy if she has cash when he finds out that he doesn't even have $40. In reality, the writers didn't make either George or Amy change a tire because they, nor anyone on the entire set, has ever changed a tire. Danny is struggling to use a bench press while wearing a shirt that says Holy Covenant Korean Church on it. I sincerely hope that isn't a serious portrayal of what Danny believes in because we've already seen him stealing Paul's cryptocurrency account passwords, refusing to give him access to them, while agreeing to store boxes which most likely contain illegal goods in them for a criminal, and continually riding the high horse of thinking he can tell Paul what to do with his life when Danny's life isn't exactly going well. It's like if your single friend who's never dated anyone thinks they're entitled enough to give you dating advice. These aren't Christian values. Of course, Christians aren't perfect because no one is perfect, but if you're really Christian, you don't even want to go around stealing and then willingly becoming an accomplice to illegal smuggling. It's hardly something people just fall into. These are choices that Danny has made. All I'm saying is Danny's choices aren't the choices of someone who would also choose Christianity. What I will believe is that Danny got that shirt from the local thrift shop to virtue signal any sense of goodness he can find because he knows he's a horrible person. Paul is lifting some weights and Danny gets off the bench press. Danny says it's Paul's turn, so Paul starts using the bench press and Danny tries to tell him how to use it, but Paul is infinitely better at it than Danny was. Not really funny, but it just makes Danny look like more of an ass. Danny says we should start a new contracting company as brothers. Paul asks why, since Danny constantly calls him lazy, based. Danny manipulates Paul into starting the company with him because he is taking the criminal's advice and he wants to start the business under Paul's name. Why are we still taking shady advice from a convicted criminal? He tells Paul fake platitudes like, I see you're ready to step up, I can tell, in this fake voice, and when Paul comes around, he asks, you actually gonna listen to me? Danny lies and says, yeah. Such great Christian behavior. Manipulate your brother into starting a company with you so you can register the business under his name after you ruined yours because you decided to act like a child and pee all over a random person's house after posing as a contractor and then lie to your brother saying you'll give him an equal say in the business. It's the epitome of morality. I had half wondered if this was social engineering against Christianity, but then I came to my senses and realized that couldn't possibly be true because the writers live in California. Danny and Paul continue working out, and Paul takes a shirtless selfie. They talk about Danny's ex-girlfriend Veronica, who broke up with Danny while she was in college and coincidentally met her future husband at that same college. Amy and Naomi, a new character, are hanging out watching their two little girls playing at a table. Amy says June was having a bad day because Amy was late picking her up from school because of the flat tire incident earlier. Amy then says June hit a teacher. Great parenting skills. I had bad days as a child and knew hitting anyone was the wrong thing to do. I especially knew that hitting adults was wrong. Amy then uses the word dysregulated. I looked it up because I didn't know that was a word, and it means inability to control or regulate one's emotional responses. It means temper tantrum. Children have temper tantrums, usually when they're toddlers, and parents correct that behavior by the time the child is school age. It says a lot about the lack of Amy and George's parenting skills that June is like this. I'm not an expert on the age of children, but June is definitely not a toddler anymore. The hippie bullshit way that George talks could be why June still has temper tantrums. Without discipline like firm words and telling the child, you are the authority and guidance as their parent, the child isn't going to understand how to interact with authority properly. I don't even remember my parents having to tell me, don't just randomly hit people, and my guess is because I was really young when I learned that lesson, and memories don't really start being retained till the child is older. Which means, as a toddler, I was probably disciplined in a way that knocked any of that behavior out of my head, so that I didn't even think it was a possibility as I got older. The great parenting continues as Naomi says Izzy bit our neighbor's dog. Did she think it was food? Don't get mad at me, you're the one who put that line in your own show, and then decided to keep it in the final cut. All I did was notice, 'cause none of you apparently did. Start the awards ceremony. Get these two ladies Mother of the Year awards. Their children are awful. Naomi and Amy continue talking, revealing that they met through the pretentious CEO Jordan, who is Naomi's sister-in-law. Amy says she's tired of having to worry about the business deal with Jordan falling through, and then says, I'm so jealous, it must be so nice getting to spend all day at home with Izzy. Looks like the feminists are now realizing that when they hit themselves with hammers, it leaves a bruise. For decades, feminists have been saying women need to be in the workforce, and now when they are in the workforce, they're jealous of housewives. That could explain the recent overreaction to what feminists call trad wife videos on TikTok. They're really mad at themselves because the trad wife picked the life the feminist actually wanted, except now the feminist is too deranged to just admit she's wrong and change her own life course. Another case of you didn't know what you had till it was gone, feminists? There are a majority of women who want that mother lifestyle where they are at home with their kid. There is only a small minority of women who actually want to work. But feminists were telling all women to go to work. Turns out it was a lie. Turns out that what feminists really wanted was to take your choices away, women. Your choice to stay home or go to work. Naomi responds with, yeah, it's great, but I don't spend all day at home, because she feels judged. The way she said, yeah, it's great, made me feel like she wasn't convinced about her own words. Naomi continues on with all the random shit she does that isn't housewife related, and it makes me feel like she feels insecure about her choices. She's been made to feel like being a housewife is a bad thing, so she justifies it with, but I don't spend all day at home. This is another result of feminism. Women now feel bad for making a choice that wasn't what the feminist ideology told them, which proves feminist ideology is tyrannical and never had anything to do with women choosing what they wanted to do with their own lives. It was about, don't let the men tell you how to live your life, but it's really about, you have to do what feminists tell you to do with your life. Naomi then shows Amy a social media site with a video of her and Danny's car chase. It turns out the person whose flowers Danny drove through isn't happy about their flower bed being destroyed. Naomi says she doesn't understand what some people are so angry about, to which Amy replies George's bullshit hippie line, anger is just a transitory state of consciousness. Naomi says, I love that. You're so smart, Amy. Idiots! It's amazing how some people can hear a bunch of bullshit and mistake it for intelligence. This is not intelligent. This doesn't mean anything. It's also a lie. Anger is a human emotion. Paul and Danny are at Veronica's house, and Danny is distracted by the fact that Veronica is now pregnant. Paul is pitching their contractor company to Veronica and her husband. Veronica's husband, whose name is Edwin, says they don't currently need any services, and then Veronica invites Danny and Paul to her church. I wonder if Veronica and Edwin are real Christians or fake ones like Danny. Veronica mentions someone who needs some plumbing work done, and Danny leaves the room because Isaac texted him, "Call me 911." Danny calls and Isaac says this gem of a line, "I'm just finishing up taking a shit, rubbing some cortisol on my back." The leftist obsession with thinking comedy means how much you can disgust the audience is retarded. They think the more absurd they make a statement, the funnier it will be, but they just sound like immature teenagers. If this show was about teenagers, it would make way more sense, because everything is so immature and stupid. Isaac continues talking about the most boring shit in the world, and I fight to keep myself awake so I can finish this review. Finally, after 900 millennia, Isaac gets to his point and tells Danny an Asian couple was looking for him at the motel. Danny, for some reason, is holding a teddy bear after he hangs up with Isaac, rocking it as if it is a baby. Perhaps he wishes he was the father of Veronica's baby. Thank God he's not, though, or that kid wouldn't be potty trained. Amy and George are in their closet getting dressed. Amy gets a phone notification, and for once, George is wearing clothes made for a man. However, he seems to be incapable of putting them on correctly. He is struggling to put a necktie on, and once again, for the third time in this episode, social engineering happens. Boo! This is social engineering against men once again. Amy goes over and offers to help further emasculate George, and he actually stands up for himself, which is surprising. He says, "No, I can do it." Amy says, "I don't mind." But that's not the point, Amy. He's a man. A necktie is a man's article of clothing, and it's embarrassing when a man can't even tie his own necktie. It doesn't matter if you mind helping. It's the fact that George wants to be capable of dressing himself. He's not a child. He's a grown man. Amy then says, "It makes you dependent on me, so you can't leave." I think I've heard psychopaths say that very same thing to their victims. Surprisingly, George stands up for himself a second time and insists, "I can tie a tie." Amy asks George if he's still mad about the flat tire, still completely missing the point that she is treating her husband like a 5-year-old. George leaves, still messing with his necktie, but then comes back and throws the tie back in the closet, saying, "I decided not to wear it." There's where the final emasculation happens. He didn't even get to successfully wear the necktie. George throwing it back into the closet is symbolic of him returning his balls to Amy's purse. Amy listens to a voicemail Danny left her where he threatens her. Gotta love that fake Christian behavior coming out again, calling someone to threaten them. How Christian of you, Danny. Amy takes her laptop into the bathroom to use it, even though she knows George is on his way out of the house. She has Danny's business Instagram page open, and she starts making a fake account so she can Instagram stalk Danny. She chooses the alias Kayla Lexington, then goes to her employee Mia's Instagram page to steal her photos. Great characters, I tell ya. Such great virtues these two main characters have. Why am I supposed to like these people? It's the epitome of morality. As Amy is committing identity theft, she sees George's name under some of Mia's photos, indicating that he has liked her photos, which annoys her. Amy continues stealing Mia's identity and then leaves a flirty message for Danny on his business Instagram. She gets a message back from the business Instagram account, and it is Paul's shirtless selfie. Paul is talking to Veronica's friend Esther after Veronica suggested that she needed plumbing services. Danny is working on snaking the bathtub drain. It turns out Paul isn't really a good employee because he's not really talking about anything relevant to the business with Esther. Instead, he is flirting with her, which pisses Danny off. He bangs a wrench against Esther's tub. Rude. And Paul stops talking. Danny gets upset with Paul, and Paul gets a notification on his phone. It's from Amy posing as Kayla, and he shows Danny the Instagram page. Danny says it's a bot, and Paul walks away, but then questions it and messages Amy whether she's a bot. Amy says no, and Paul continues not to help Danny with the bathtub. Fumi is being pretentious at an art gallery full of chairs. Amy, George, and June are there listening to her while I try not to fall asleep again. Fumi says, "So naturally, the curvature of the seat is modeled after the contours of my own backside." Did she just say the chair is the shape of her ass? Jordan comes over to Amy, George, and June after Fumi leaves to go be pretentious somewhere else. Jordan's actually polite for once, and bends down to greet June to say hi, but June, being the disturbed child of two incapable parents, doesn't know how to be polite and say hi back to Jordan. Amy at least says, "Junie, say hi." But June hides behind George. Jordan then says maybe she'll get more polite as she gets older. Based. Jordan asks if the story about the chair is true or made up, which offends George. George says the most disturbing words ever heard in the history of the world. "I have photos of my mom sitting naked on the mold." I wouldn't advertise that in public, George. People might think you're a lunatic. No one should have naked photos of their parents. It's highly disturbing. Jordan loses any points I gave her when she is fascinated by George's words instead of repulsed, and goes over to caress the chair, specifically in the spot where Fumi's ass would have been. There is something seriously wrong with everyone involved in this show. After what seems like entirely too long, Jordan stops feeling up the chair and asks how much. George doesn't want to sell it, but Amy is worried about the potential business deal she might have with Jordan, so she gets annoyed with George. Jordan presses George and he rejects her offer again. Jordan gets flustered, then leaves the gallery in a rush, which concerns Amy because she doesn't want it to jeopardize her business deal with Jordan. Danny and Paul are at a nightclub with the most annoying song ever playing in the background. Danny is trying to give Paul some shots, but Paul is playing on his phone. The alleged music says, "Green light, saddy, ass cheeks, daddy," then proceeds to repeat the word ratchet 800 times. What is it with music these days? It's all about saying things that make no sense, and then repeating words as if it's desirable to anyone's eardrums. Danny reveals he's racist when he looks at Paul's phone and tries to discourage him from talking to Kayla because she's white. This is just plain old racism out in the open with no shame. Free-range racism, folks. Danny tells Paul that when he's older, he's going to want to come home to a woman who can make Korean food. Paul replies, "Maybe I want to come home to her," pointing at Kayla, "making me chicken parm." Based. At least Paul isn't racist. I don't really like any of these characters, but Paul seems the most based character out of all of them. You know your show is bad when the one character anyone likes is the character who doesn't really do anything. The standards of this show are so low that all you have to do to be likable is, well, nothing. Paul hasn't done anything except play video games, trade crypto, swim in a pool, drink some shots, play on his phone, work out, and flirt with a client. His character has done nothing, but his character is the only one so far who hasn't committed a crime or been insufferable. We'll see if that changes later on, but for now, within the parameters of this terrible show, Paul is the best character. I'm not saying I like him, I'm just saying I don't want to throw him into Mordor. Danny gets offended by Paul's chicken parm comment and says white girls are only good for messing around with. If I said Mexican girls are only good for messing around with, the world would explode. This is further proof the writers are racist assholes. Danny continues to dig his racist hole, telling Paul he has to bring home a nice Korean girl when he settles down. If any white family said their son or daughter had to bring home a nice white person when they settled down, once again the world would explode. Standards, like double fucking standards. But don't worry, it gets worse. Danny says, "You think they're gonna want their grandkids looking up at them with like huge round eyes like fucking bugs?" If you're trying to get people to like your show, this is not how. If I say, I wouldn't want my grandkids looking up at me with tiny little eyes like fucking paper cuts, hey, don't get mad at me. You started it. Also, don't dish it if you can't take it. Paul says, yo, you waste too much time following arbitrary rules. Based. You know your show is bad when all you have to do to be a somewhat decent character is to not be a raging racist. That should just be the base level for everyone. We should all know that being a racist is a shit move, but apparently the writers didn't get that memo. It's the epitome of morality. Paul leaves because Danny is an asshole. The music continues being ridiculous by saying, real hot girl, yeah, I'm about to big back, ratchet, ratchet, ratchet. It's no surprise I've stopped listening to mainstream music. Amy's mad at George because he managed to regain ownership of his balls for 30 seconds. He says, "I'm sorry, I thought you wanted me to be more assertive." This is the bullshit feminists pull on everyone constantly. They tell women feminism is about choice, but then the second the woman makes her own choice, they get upset about it. They tell men masculinity is toxic, then realize they actually miss masculinity, so then they tell the men to be more assertive, but then the second the man is more assertive, the feminist is upset about it. It's a roller coaster of bullshit, proving no one should have ever listened to feminists to begin with. Amy, of course, is worried about her business deal, and George says there are more important things than money, like his mother's ass chair. Here's another point in time where I get to laugh at feminists for making the choices they do. Amy complains that she busts her ass for the family and isn't happy about it. This was the bed you feminists made for yourselves. Welcome to the consequences of your own actions. George actually suggests something normal, which is that he and Amy could do something simple together, like unload the dishwasher, turn on some music, and make it fun. Amy gets a notification from Paul, who's talking to her fake Kayla account, and ignores George. Amy asks George if they can enjoy the rest of the night. He agrees, and then Amy immediately corners him with why he's liking Mia's Instagram photos. If you didn't want to fight anymore, Amy, why are you picking a fight? It's like short-term memory loss with these writers. It is true that Amy sat down as she told George she didn't want to fight anymore, and a gallery employee told her not to sit on the artwork. But that's hardly enough time for Amy to forget that she told George she didn't want to fight anymore. Amy complains again that she's always busy working. Then she says, "I just want to be taken care of." Better choose your words carefully there, Amy. You're pretty insufferable. On a serious note, feminists are the densest group of people ever to walk the earth. Feminists, once again, for decades, complained that women shouldn't have to be taken care of. Now that men are afraid of them, for good reason, they are complaining that no one wants to take care of them. The choices you made got you here, feminists. Frankly, you deserve your misery. Welcome to the consequences of your own actions. Danny is sitting alone at the bar because Paul doesn't want to hang out with a racist. At least that's accurate. Danny tries to offer one of the drinks to the bartender, but the bartender declines and says, "Sorry, my boss is watching." We find the one person in the show with any sense of decency and work ethic. Too bad he's just a one-line character. The bartender continues working as Danny tries to talk to him and walks away to serve other customers. It's sad when the extras in your show work harder than the writers did on the script. It's George's turn to be pretentious as he is overheard saying, "I guess when you think about it, the ground was the original chair." No, the ground was the ground. It was uncomfortable, which is why we created chairs. Sitting on something doesn't turn it into a chair. If I sit on a table, the table doesn't magically become a chair. Idiots! Amy is standing alone, glaring at George from across the room, and she sends him a passive-aggressive text saying if he's going to ignore her all night, she's going to go to the store. Amy sees George look at his phone, put it back in his pocket, and ignore her. She gets mad and leaves the gallery. Danny gets a voicemail from Amy, and she retaliates by threatening him as well.
"I would love to let this go, but actions have consequences."
That's rich, coming from a bunch of leftist writers. Leftists don't believe in consequences. They think they should be able to get away with everything. There have been leftist activists who live stream their crimes and still don't get any consequences. It seems that comedy only appears when the writers own themselves. Danny thinks he sees Amy in the crowd as he's looking around, but it turns out to just be a hallucination. Paul comes by with two girls and tells Danny they should go home. Outside the nightclub, Danny and Paul walk to the truck. Paul asks if Danny's truck is big enough for them and the girls to ride in. Danny walks up to his truck and sees "I can't drive" painted in white paint on the hood. Paul knows Danny probably needs some comfort, so he offers for Danny to go back inside and drink a little more, but Danny refuses to go. Paul tries to calm Danny down because he doesn't want the girls to think he's friends with a psycho. Too late there, Paul. But Danny still resists and fights back against Paul. Paul gets mad and leaves. Danny tells Paul he's fired. You know who else is fired? These writers. Paul goes back to argue with Danny and the girls leave. Paul says Danny can't fire him because the company is under his name, and Danny reveals the truth that he only wanted to use Paul's name because he ruined his own name when he forgot how to aim for the toilet. Paul asks who else's name Danny would use because he can't use Paul's anymore, and Danny says Isaac. Paul says, Isaac? Really? Based. Once again, Paul is the only character with any brain cells. Paul knows that using a criminal's name on a business is a bad idea. Paul leaves. Amy comes home pleased with her latest act of vandalism. She goes into George's art studio and finds him making some more unicorn shit on his pottery wheel. He tells Amy that they need to talk. George recommends couples therapy, and Amy surprises him by agreeing. Amy goes to touch George's face, and they get lost in each other's eyes. George's art collapses, and he's disappointed, but let's face it, it can't be any worse than anything else he's created. Now I'm looking at a street, and it takes forever for anything to happen. But finally, the squirrels powering Danny's truck managed to get him up the hill and into view of the camera. Seriously, why they kept so much of that footage in of a street light is beyond me. Danny parks about 18 feet from the curb and gets out of his squirrel mobile. The camera pans around to show Amy has written "I am poor" on the driver's side and "I'm a bitch" on the tailgate. Based. Danny grabs a hammer out of his toolbox. The camera pans around, revealing that he is standing in front of Amy's house ready to commit more crime. That's it for episode 2 of Beef. The characters remain insufferable, all except for Paul, the only character with at least one brain cell. The writers really went out of their way to emasculate George in this episode and show Danny as a racist idiot. Amy and Naomi are both deep in feminist propaganda, although on opposite sides of it. Amy wishes she had all the things feminists fought for decades to erase, like a manly husband who just wants to take care of her. And Naomi feels intense shame for just being a housewife, because the propaganda has told her that to be a housewife is to be a failure as a woman. Fumi is pretentious, Jordan gets entirely too friendly with a chair, and June has no manners. This show portrays everything wrong with the leftist ideology, but somehow I think that went above the writers' heads. Until Hollywood decides to make better entertainment, I'll be making fun of terrible shows. So, next time I'll be making fun of episode 3 of Beef. Please don't be stupid. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.